Hello all. So today I'm talking about a Dodge with the P0344 code, what it is and how you go about fixing it. So what is a Dodge P0344 code? Well, it's a camshaft position sensor A circuit intermittent bank 1 or signal sensor. And what does this mean? Well, the camshaft position sensor reports back to the onboard computer the location of the cam as it spins, and it's for timing. And so the onboard computer is seeing an error inside the system, so it'll need to be troubleshooted as to why. And usually when this happens, you won't get no spark and the engine won't start. And the camshaft position sensor is just a small device that bolts into the engine. It detects when metal goes right in front of it. So it detects the teeth of the camshaft as it spins. And so when you get this error, it's going to be one of two things. It's either going to be in the wiring or it's going to be a bad sensor. And so a lot of people just swap out the sensor, and then if that doesn't work, they'll go into the wiring. But the wiring is pretty easy to troubleshoot too. And so the first thing to do is going to be to Google where this sensor is located on your engine. Sometimes there can be two sensors in some of the newer vehicles. It's not very common. Usually there's just going to be one. But the first thing to do is Google where your sensor is located. And the next thing to do is going to be to examine the harness that goes in. Now, older Dodges, they'd have 2 wires. That's not very common anymore. And some newer Dodges will have 4 wires, but that's not very common either. By far, the most common wiring harness is going to be 3 wires. And what you'll have here is you'll have, like, the middle wire will be like ground. One of these wires will be ground, usually the middle. Then you'll have one going back to the battery for a reference voltage. So you should get like 12 volts between like the middle and one of the outer pins. And the other pin is going to be going back to the onboard computer. And so what many mechanics will do is they'll take the sensor out of the vehicle, they'll plug it into the harness, they'll put the key in the on position, and they'll come behind the harness with the meter. They'll go to the return wire back to the onboard computer to ground, and they'll put a piece of metal in front of the sensor. And if the voltage changes, if it goes from like 5 volts to 0 volts, then you know the circuit's working. And if nothing changes, then you know there's a problem inside of the circuit. But that's a real quick, easy way many mechanics will use to troubleshoot the wiring. There's some YouTube videos on that if you want to get more in depth. But the wiring is pretty simple. It's not difficult to check as long as you have a meter. And one thing to keep in mind is this whole electrical circuit is usually on a fuse somewhere. So check for a fuse, usually inside the engine compartment, but it could also be up and underneath the dash. But quite commonly it has a fuse, and if there's a short circuit, it could have blown. So it's something to keep in mind and check for is possibly a blown fuse. And I'm going to jump over to Amazon and give you an idea how much these sensors are costing right now. They're usually less than 20, 30 bucks. They're not expensive items. They're nothing. So they're not a high cost part. And the most difficult part of changing out a camshaft position sensor is if there's anything in the way. Since swapping it out itself is usually easy, you usually just have like 1 or 2 bolts and a wiring harness, but sometimes other components can be in the way and you have to remove them. It could be underneath the valve timing cover or things like this. And sometimes they can be difficult to get to. Sometimes they're easy, sometimes they'll be right there and they'll just be simple, but other times they can be more difficult. So what do you do if you have a Dodge with the P0344 code? Well, first thing to do, Google where your sensor is located on your engine. Check out the wiring harness. Be sure that's all good. Be sure the wiring's good, because bad wiring can cause the same symptoms as a bad sensor. Once you know the wiring's good, check for a fuse. If you have a blown fuse that's on that circuit, then it could cause no power to go to it, so it could cause an issue. So once you know the wiring's good, that there's no blown fuse, then go ahead and swap out that sensor, and usually that'll solve the problem. And so that's basically it. I just wanted to give a real quick brief overview of what you could do if you had a Dodge with the P0344 code and how you go about fixing it. If you have anything to add, please comment down below. If you have any questions, ask me and I'll try to answer them. If this video helps you, please click like, please click subscribe, and have a good day.